Seahawks fans, wherever you may be, welcome back for another edition of the Seahawks Playbook podcast. Join your host, Bill Alvstad, and co-host, sports writer and football analyst Keith Myers, as we talk Seahawks football. Hey, Seahawk fans. Welcome back to another episode of the Seahawks Playbook podcast. I'm your host, Bill Alvstad, sitting down with co-host Keith Myers, here to talk Seahawk football. We are continuing our roster look, position group look at all of the players on the current 90-man roster. And we are now to the defensive end group. So we did defensive tackles on the interior, very interior. Now we're going to do kind of our 3-tech, 5-tech, defensive ends in this defense. And welcome in, Keith.
Yeah, so we hit nose tackle really hard in the last episode, and nose tackle is an interesting group, and this is it's odd because you'd think defensive line there's going to be a lot of overlap, and except for in like third and long, there's just not a lot of overlap between the nose tackles and the defensive ends.
Yeah, there may be a little bit between the 3-techs moving inside a little bit because it seems like we're playing faster, more athletic guys, maybe on passing down. So there may be a little bit of that. And we can talk about that a little bit today. They did release one of our defensive tackles, possibly two. Forrest Merrill is no longer on the team. I'm just looking at this list really quick. And yeah, there was another guy that was released, I think, prior to our recording. We already had information on that, but Forrest Merrill was let go just the other day after we recorded that show. Made that room even lighter, which is hard to do. But you know, if you're going to do it, you do it in June, and you have enough time to balance this thing out. But
was that a pun? Because we're talking about 330-pound defensive linemen.
Yes, intended, right?
Yes, of course it is.
So before we get started today, I wanted to talk a little bit about OTAs and injury updates. Michael Sean Dugar of The Athletic wrote an article covering the OTAs and had a bunch of information on injury updates. And since a lot of people don't have access to The Athletic, I would recommend getting access to The Athletic because it's a terrific base of writers and lots of information about the Seahawks specifically. But thought I'd share some of that insight because it was good. Pete Carroll came on record and talked about a lot of different guys, and I thought I'd share a few things. Number one, he talked about Tariq Woolen, had arthroscopic knee surgery on May 23rd. It was successful. He said he's got 4 to 6 week recovery, and training camp is not in jeopardy. He's going to be on time. Everything's going to be good. Apparently, he tweaked it just walking in between plays, which is tough. I guess that happens. I mean, a lot of wear and tear, a lot of sudden starts, stops, agility, all that kind of stuff, and you got to be careful. I mean, what do you think of an injury like this to an emerging best player on the defense, Tariq Woolen, and his long-term ability to kind of manage that?
Well, I mean, it is a major concern. I mean, this is a guy that was a Pro Bowler and looked all pro, like ready as a rookie, which is crazy. And the team needs him healthy. I mean, you don't lose a player that good and not take a major hit. So they just really need to take and slow play this. You've got we're in early June. The season starts in September. You've got time to go through and make sure that this isn't a lingering thing. And if it is, then is there something else you can do? I would rather have the Seahawks lose him for part of a season in order to get something cleaned up so that he doesn't have a problem than have him like be constantly hampered by something all year.
Agreed. And, you know, Pete indicated that it was a cartilage related tissue issue. And so not structural. So it was good that they found this, went in, cleaned it up. Shouldn't be an issue. It doesn't indicate that it would be a continuing problem necessarily, or unrelated to any other future knee things. So hopefully that's it.
Yeah.
One of the more concerning notes on a player I heard was that Brian Monet had ACL surgery during the season. We all knew that. Came late in the season, but Carroll said, quote, "It's been a little up and down for him. It hasn't been quite as forward as moving as some of the other recoveries. He's a huge guy, 360 pounds. It's harder on him than it is on other guys. He's been here the whole time and he's dedicating himself to it. We're hoping he'll make it back. We're counting on him," quote unquote. So
That
that
is
doesn't sound good from
not
Pete Carroll.
that see, Pete Carroll is super optimistic about everything, right? And that does not sound optimistic, which means, um,
He'll
Pete's just
not
straight
be
up
back.
admitting it. That Pete's straight up
Right.
admitting that it doesn't look good. He won't be ready.
Which is crazy because it's not crazy. In ACL, 90% of the time those things are successful as
Mhm.
far as the actual surgery. Now, if it something's weird and it just doesn't happen, or there's some other peripheral injury they didn't see before the surgery, they went in, they did the surgery, and the other things hampering recovery, that could be an issue. So we just don't know. We're hoping
Well,
he'll make it back, which does not look or sound good.
some of it though is um, when they go in and they do an ACL reconstruction, it kinda depends on how much damage to overall to the entire knee. Like, um, if you're an NFL running back or whatever, like a lot of when they because those are guys that do that, when they go in, if you're the knee's already a mess and mangled, it makes for really a harder surgery and a harder recovery. If you remember when Adrian Peterson tore his in December, but made it back for the first week of the season, but the doctor had gone in and said it was like, you know, a kid's injury as far as like how healthy the knee was, which everyone was shocked at because he's a running back. But that's how he made it back so quick. We're talking about a guy who's 360 pounds and does athletic things like, play football in the NFL. Um, his knees might have been just not in great shape already because of just the wear and tear on that joint when you're that big. And if his knees were in, kind of messed up shape when they went in to try and do this, it's going to mean the surgery is going to be harder and it's going to take a lot longer to get back. And, when you've got that much weight and you're carrying it around it's easy to do something where you tweak something a little bit and pull something here or whatever and just slow your recovery down. So it just makes it harder when I mean he's a nose tackle. The team wants him big, but um it just makes for these things to be tougher.
So let me ask you this. Prior to the draft, we went through a free agency period. We went through the draft. I would think that the Seahawks were receiving updates on his condition, or as
Hmm.
far as recovery and working out and so forth, any setbacks. And then they went through free agency. They really didn't get a nose tackle at all.
Nope.
Brian Monet was literally on the roster as the only nose tackle prior to the draft. They waited until the fourth round, grabbed Cameron Young. And then
Hmm.
after the draft, they really didn't do anything. They grabbed a couple of rookie undrafted free agents to fill out the roster. And then they released Merrill. Now we find out that Brian Monet possibly won't be back at the start of the season, and nobody knows at this point. And they still haven't really addressed the position. I'm kind of now questioning what's going on in John Schneider's office.
Well, I think it sounds to me when you look at all that it's intentional. That this is a position that is a two down position. And it's one where they're like, we can, because this, remember, the team was cap strapped for most of this offseason. And they can, at some point you have to like figure out, well, how are we going to use that cap space? And they chose to spend it on Young, who's going to play right next to the nose tackle, than on the nose tackle. Um, it felt also that Kuna Ford and or Al Woods were going to be sitting there. They were going to wait till after the draft and then um, figure out what they did, make a decision. One of those guys would come back, and both of those guys signed right before Seattle would have brought one of them in. And so now they're like, well, that our plan B isn't there anymore. My guess is they have a plan C, and it is, um, there are guys that they can, um, you know, make a trade for um, a younger nose tackle whose name most of us have probably never heard of because nose tackles don't get a lot of press, and they're guys in the middle that eat space and all of that. But they can
Yep.
make a trade for a nose tackle for the year, or wait until you know getting closer to the season, like after training camp and the preseason, and just watch the waiver wire because there are guys that will get cut because salary cap issues, or their team drafted their replacement, and um so they know, we kind of have an idea. There's some guys that are probably going to be cut, so we're watching for that, and they'll bring someone in not long before the start of the season to pick up that spot.
Yeah, and there's an excess of defensive tackles in this league, and there's just the opposite problem for Seattle right now. But a lot of teams have excess defensive tackles on their roster, and you're right, there'll be something available. It happens every year that way. It's just
Hmm.
hard as a fan to be patient and wait this thing out, and not have somebody in camp that they can rotate with. Cameron Young as well is tough. It gives a good opportunity though for a couple of those undrafted rookie free agents to at least get some playing time, possibly on the field in preseason, to be able to showcase what they've got. If not for Seattle, somebody else. So there's
Hmm.
that. Okay, let's keep going here so we can get to our main segment. Abe Lucas, offseason shoulder surgery. Carroll said he's doing great. His strength is almost all the way back. There's no hesitation that he'll make it back. Quite the opposite of the Monet statement. Standout players at OTAs, and I'll just kind of go through them. Geno Smith been playing well, very well. Came in ready to lead. Has done that, shown by example. Also made all the throws, everything you want out of a franchise guy. That's great. I've been hearing the opposite of Drew Lock, to be completely honest. Just not quite ready. Errant throws, um, that sort of thing. Nothing to read into it
Hmm.
too much yet, but seems like Geno Smith was just ready to go, which is good news. Michael Jackson, apparently making play after play during practice, passes knocked down, interceptions, just all over the field. Not going to give up that outside corner spot so easily. Pete Carroll just, basically raved about him. Kind of a veteran presence in the secondary, kind of coming in, just being ready
Hmm.
to compete. And I thought that was great.
Yeah,
Um,
that's a good problem to have, where you have three guys that you really want on the field in the two
yeah,
positions.
yeah,
And so
and
you go, okay, I was
go
say
ahead.
it also makes it better with Woolen having the knee issue and not getting a chance to be out there and whatnot. Is it when it comes to, at least with practice and the practice reps, if Jackson's playing at that at a high level and that kind of stuff, it does mimic for the rest of the defense having Woolen in there. And so it's I don't I'm not that surprised that Jackson has come in, and they drafted his replacement 5 overall, and he's in here ready to go and taking every rep seriously. He does not want to give up his job.
Yeah,
And if he does lose it, he wants a showcase for other teams and be
yeah.
like, I'm ready. I'm a guy that can contribute. Come trade for me.
Yeah, and maybe they do trade Mike Jackson for a defensive tackle.
For a nose
um,
tackle.
yeah, nose tackle, right? Okay, Jake Bobo, wide receiver out of UCLA, has been showing up, I guess, every day in practice, enough for Pete Carroll to single him out as a guy that's making some plays, making things happen. Not an athletic guy, but a big guy. So 6'4", 200 plus pounds, kind of a red zone target. He's just been making play after play. Mike Morris has been standing out. Oluwatimi, the center, both guys drafted out of Michigan. Charbonnet has been showing up. Pete Carroll called him a seasoned, looks like a seasoned vet. Bobby Wagner, of course. Everyone loves Bobby Wagner, and he's been making rounds in the locker room and endearing himself to all the rookies. And Tariq Smith, which is this is one of the good news stories out of camp, is that Clint Hurt singled him out as a guy that's showed up and has taken his offseason seriously, showed up healthy and ready to fight for a spot in the rotation as a edge rusher. Tyreek Smith, we
Mhm.
drafted him last year, didn't get on the field, went on injured reserve the entire season out of Ohio State, but he's got some pass rushing chops and he's waiting to
Mm.
unleash.
Mhm.
So that'll be interesting. And then Geno Smith mentioned, singled out Jackson Smith and Jingba as a wide receiver that's just really looking good right out of the gate. And Jigba started slowly because of a hamstring. They're kind of easing him in. Now he's kind of doing drills, working into, uh, you know, full speed and really impressive for Geno Smith. So that was good. So that's the end of my spiel on OTAs and injuries. You got anything else, Keith?
No. Let's get into our
All
main
right,
segment for the show.
let's do it.
Defensive ends. In a 3-4, a bear front like what Seattle's running, the defensive ends are not the guys out wide, coming around the corner. That's the edge guys. Those are the outside linebackers. Defensive ends are interior pass rushers for the most part, and right next to the nose tackle. Usually when they run when they go to a full bear front, which they did a lot last year, the nose tackle is over the center, and then you put each of the quote unquote ends over a guard, and they're in that spot right up front. And so when we're talking defensive ends in a 3-4, we're not talking about the Chris Clemens and Cliff Avrils of the world.
We'll talk about them in the next show.
Yeah. I just want to make that part clear that we're still
Yeah.
talking about some big bodied guys.
And these
Um,
guys, what we're talking about is guys that are in the 285 range as far as
mhm,
weight. 285 to 300 pounds is where your 3-4 defensive ends are going to live. Again, you're right. They're not the guys that are outside rushing, from the 9 tech or the 7 tech or even the 5 tech. Usually they're playing in the inside in the 3 tech spot next to the nose tackle. And in Pete Carroll's defense, you're going to be multiple. You're going to be able to just play a couple, 2 or 3 different positions, but that's kind of where you're going to live. You're right inside the tackles, and we have a decent group. I mean, this is this is the part we were really concerned with the nose tackle group. You know,
mhm.
and this show, we did all the research. I'm sure you've kind of felt the same way. This is kind of the part where you start to feel pretty good about where we're at with the roster, especially with the additions we had this year.
Yeah. It's a yeah, I mean, this was a group that I felt was kind of a weakness last year. I mean, Shelby Harris was there, and played well, but didn't get a lot out of the other side. Um, and obviously, we're talking about defensive linemen. They don't play 100% of the snaps. If your rotation's set right, they're getting, your starters are getting 60. And then you have rotation guys, and they didn't really have much that could rotate in and do well here. Um, that's not the case, I feel, right now. Right now, this group feels really solid, and that's it's an interesting spot to be.
Yeah. Well, let's start with Dre Jones. Age 26, came over in free agency from Denver.
Hmm.
6'3", 281 pounds, third round pick for them in 2019. Ended up working really well, but they let him go in free agency, which was a little bit surprising. But he's been solid, not spectacular, but really a solid guy. Definitely an upgrade for us.
Hmm.
How many sacks can Dre Jones get? He had 6.5 last season. He's got 22 sacks over his career since 2019. So he's very consistent over time. Good edge defender as far as playing the run, and just overall, I think he's going to be a definite infusion of talent, well needed on that defensive line to really make an impact this year. especially stopping the run. I think he's going to get upfield. He's going to disrupt the pocket. He's going to have timing. He's going to clean up. Especially if
Mhm.
Cameron Young has a really good season on the inside. A guy like Dre Jones going to really benefit from that. So, what do you think about this guy?
Well, I mean, he's one of the better scheme fits out there, just period. And, you know, when Seattle was in talks with Denver and for the Russell Wilson trade, they wanted Dre Jones. He was like, when it comes to players, he was the top of the list. And Denver said no. And so it ended up working out, and they ended up getting Shelby Harris, which is was fine. But the idea was that, Dre Jones was gonna be there long term, but you've seen a coaching change, you've seen some other change there, and they were running into some cap problems and couldn't figure out how to pay him. So he ended up walking, and that was a big loss for Denver, and a very good player, just a very good player. He's very disruptive. Yeah, 6.5 sacks, which for your 3-4 defensive ends is a good thing, and, they paid him. I mean, they paid him pretty well,
Yeah,
17 million a year on average, so he better come in and be disruptive and be a major force.
you're right. They did pay him. It was one of the the most expensive free agent that Seattle has brought in under the Pete Carroll regime. And I'm hoping for immediate impact, immediate dividends here paid for the Seahawks defense. This is one of the areas that we definitely needed to upgrade as far as stopping the run. I thought that teams were able to run all over us last year, regardless of who was in there. I don't know if it was scheme
Mhm.
oriented. There's a couple other guys on Seahawks Twitter, Mike Spin Move, etc., Griff, and a few other guys that definitely point to scheme as being an issue. That the personnel wasn't necessarily the issue, or being in a 3-4 compared to a 4-3. But there were schematic issues, coaching issues to point to. So we'll see about that. Clint Hurt feels confident that we've improved in that area as well as upgraded our personnel. So I
Well,
have
it
I
was
have good
it
hopes.
was a matter of personnel not matching scheme, which is why they were so up and down last year, and mostly down. Um, but they had a bunch of, guys that athletically and skill set wise didn't fit what they were trying to do, and that was a problem, and I think they're in better shape now.
All right, another guy we brought in. The next two I'm going to talk about. We brought in Jaron Reed. Comes back to the Seahawks. We originally drafted Reed in the third round in 2016. Now a seasoned vet comes in at 6'3", 313 pounds, can play the three tech, but can also slide in for you on passing downs to the nose tackle position. Still hold up there really well, not get pushed around. I like the signing. He's a steady player, not spectacular. Fits in what Pete Carroll likes. He's a good player. I don't think that they intended to ever want him to walk away. Ended up not coming to a resolution on contract terms a while ago, and he left in free agency, but now back. I like the signing. It really solidifies the opposite side away from Dre Jones, and they have a nice, solid combo starting twosome there.
Yeah, this was a guy that, I mean, when they drafted him, they played him at nose tackle for the first 2 years, and, um, he didn't do much when it comes to, statistically and whatnot. Good player, but not great. And then, he kind of exploded a little bit, after that when they got Poona Ford
Yeah,
in, they anchored
exploded.
Poona Ford into
Yeah,
the nose tackle spot, moved Jerron Reed over into what was a more natural spot for him, and just allowed him to, um, get up and get after the quarterback to the tune of 10.5 sacks,
yeah.
in 2018. Um,
Plus 24
you know
quarterback hits and 12 tackles for loss. I mean, it was a monster year for him, and that's why he wanted to
yeah,
get paid.
mhm, and then after that, like, he tapered back off. I mean, the 2019, if I remember right, he was hurt a bunch, and that's why he ended up 2, came back after that and got 6.5 sacks, which for an interior guy is still huge.
Yeah, yeah,
And so he wanted to get paid, and the Seahawks were looking at, okay, we've got 2 years with an awful year in the middle, for production. I think they were off in terms of overall value. And so he left, went to Kansas City, and only he got 2.5 sacks. And then so they were like, "No, we're not keeping you for what you want." So he went to Green Bay and he got 2.5 sacks. Um, so who is he? Is he the guy that got, 10.5 with Seattle back in 2018, or is he more of a 2.5 to 3 guy?
Yeah, I
That
think that undersells him a little bit. Just measuring sacks for him,
No,
I
I
don't I
know,
don't
but
think tells the whole tale for him this last
true.
couple seasons.
But as far as when guys are getting paid what he wanted,
Yes.
as interior, defensive linemen, especially people who are interior pass rushers. That is kind of what you look at. It's not a matter of him not being a good player. He is a good player. It's a matter of did having his salary match what he's doing, and he wanted to get paid as a guy who could get you 10.5 sacks, because he did that once. And the Seahawks were like, Yeah, it's great, and we hope that you can get there, but that's not who you are." And that's where there was a difference. And I think that he had a chance to go out, test the market. He played for two other teams, um, and now everyone is in a much more of agreement about where his salary should be, and that's why he's back in a Seahawk uniform. Is just the numbers just worked out better for him.
Yeah. And again, a good run defender, super run defender. He's got a good mental game about him as well. He's kind of a leader. Came from Alabama, is that correct? I can't remember for sure. And he's just a good overall player. I think he's going to be solid in this defense. Lots of tackles, solo tackles, combined tackles in the last couple of years. Quarterback hits were still there on average 12 and 14 successively. And I think that he can have an impact on the defense, especially when you surround him with good quality players. And Seahawks are going to do that. And so I think he's got a chance to be successful in here, at least come up to his career averages. And
Hmm.
in that account, I think he's solid for us for sure. Okay, let's move on to the rotation guys. First guy I want to talk about is Mario Edwards. Just quickly, 6'3", 285 pounds. Ended up not being as valuable, I think, as he was perceived in the draft originally. But he is kind of a thick defender as far as being able to play the run. I think that's where his specialty lies, is a run defender. Will not give you really any pass rush reps. I think that's where they thought he would be able to come into to the league and improve, and he just never did. And that's why he's kind of floated around a bunch of different teams, but he is solid when it comes to rotation guy against being a rotation guy. So we'll see.
Hmm.
They also give him a minimum salary. You can cut him
Yeah, he's
if they
definitely
find,
cuttable.
if Mike Morris comes in, it will get another guy we're going to talk about in just a sec, comes in and blows them out of the water as far as talent level and potential. Um, Mario Edwards wouldn't probably see the field very much, and he may be a guy that's camp casualty.
I don't know. I don't know if I think that because he's on a minimum deal, that and is there, and like I said, it's the your starters are going to play 60% of the snaps. They need guys to play the other 40, and he's cost effective for
Yeah,
that. And so I could see them holding on to him just because they can. And they need. I mean, it's more than just Morris. I expect Morris to win that job, but I also wouldn't be surprised if Edwards is on the roster too.
you know, yes, I agree with all of those things, and it really does make sense for a team that is focusing on getting to the playoffs and then having a little run there. When you want to round out your roster with really good, solid depth,
Hmm.
and that's what this is. And you want four guys here that are going to be able to play this spot, and he would definitely be one of them as of now. When you take a look at the rest of the roster, Mike Morris, draft pick out of Michigan, 6'5", 290 pounds. Feels like I heard an interview with him on Brock and Salt the other day, and he was very confident that he could stay athletic and get up to 310 pounds if that's what the team needed him to do. But right now, I think he came in at 293 officially in OTAs. Guy was Big Ten Conference Lineman of the Year in 2022.
Mhm.
11 tackles for loss, 7.5 sacks, 23 stops, 3 pass breakups, blocked a kick, forced a couple fumbles. Guy's just a great all around solid player. Defends the run really well, but also has a little juice to get around and get to the quarterback, usually with a bull rush, but he's so darn big and strong and athletic that he has that opportunity. I was thinking, the best case scenario for him is that he just is a solid rotation guy right behind Jaron Reed and Dre Jones, and he's on the field like 30-40% of the time, and he really has a decent opportunity to do that, I think, in this defense.
Oh, yeah, um this was a really good draft pick and one that kind of flew under the radar because it was a 5th round pick and all of that, but, um,
Because his testing was just awful, really.
yeah, I mean, that's really what it comes down to. He just wasn't a guy that tested well, um,
But he's a good
and
football player.
but he's a football player,
Yeah.
and that's the thing is you go through and you the stats are the stats, but it's not just, oh, use a stat compiler and wasn't, um him playing, you go watch the Michigan tape, and you'll see him. He'll show up, right? You're like, "Whoa, this guy is really disruptive. How is he in the backfield so much?"
Yeah.
That kind of stuff. But he tested terribly when it
Which
came
took him
to
out of the running
combine.
for teams that run 4-3 schemes and squarely put him into like a 3-4 defensive end spot, I think. And where you're moving in inside a little bit. I think that's where he can find success. And that's where his
Mhm,
skill set is geared towards and all that stuff. That's why they asked him to put a little bit of weight on, don't back away from the table, as Clint Hurt said. And I think they want him to be around 300 pounds where they feel like he can really set that edge for them. Yeah, and not,
mhm.
in a traditional sense, but on the inside and just kind of disrupt from the middle. And I think that's a great spot for him. And also have the ability to move out to the 5 tech and so forth and kind of be scheme diverse for them.
Yeah, I mean, we're really looking at him opposite, Dre Jones is at this point, it feels almost a certainty, that's get how where the starting alignment's gonna be, um, and
Where do you
I
put
like that.
Jaron Reed then? You move Jaron Reed inside and rotate him as a nose tackle?
Well, okay. John, you're right. John Reed probably gets the start as the veteran, but in terms of starter snaps, I think Morris is going to get those, and John Reed's not going to play too because he's gonna get snaps at both sides, right? And so there's enough snaps for 3 guys, and he'll move inside some too. So he'll also get his snaps, but it's who gets the snaps in that one spot. I guess I bet that Morris gets more um, at that one spot, and Reed moves around more in order to get his.
Wow.
But you're right. As far as actual, because starting just means you're on the field for the first play.
Yeah.
Um, what's more important is how many snaps are you getting? And
Who
I
finishes
think,
too?
yeah, I think Morris gets the bulk of the playing time at that spot, and Reed moves around.
Yeah, no, yes, and that may be in fact the plan, and maybe we should be listening to these roster pings that we're seeing, the information from Brian Monet and not really going out and making a defensive tackle, nose tackle a priority, either in free agency or the draft. After the draft, we may see that spot improve as time goes on here before the season. But right now, it looks like Jerron Reed is being kind of positioned, if you will, to play at least on passing downs from the nose tackle position, and
Mhm.
have those 3 guys, um, Dre Jones, Mike Morris, and Jerron Reed on the field at the same time on the interior for this team. It could be worse. Could be worse. I mean,
It could be worse.
we're projecting this kid, as a draft pick, 5th round, to come in and have an impact on this team. But from everything that you're hearing and seeing, the way that he was kind of dropped out in the draft a little bit. there's a lot to like there. There's a lot to like, but he's got a long ways to go. We'll see.
Yeah, looking at I went back and looked at, some of the draft stuff, and so if you look at on NFL.com, just defensive end, which for them, the way that they have separated people out this year, um, defensive ends were basically just 3-4 defensive ends. Um, or some, you can 5 techs also, but anyone that's a traditional 4-3 defensive end, they called an edge. And so it's just the bigger body guys. And he was listed based on Daniel Jeremiah and the scouting stuff as the second best defensive end in this draft. Um, he was not the second defensive end taken. There were a
Yes.
lot of guys. Um, but they had him as the second best with because they have their numerical scores, and he was one that will eventually be a starter. And one of only 2 guys that had, or 3 guys that had that tag in this draft. Everyone else was listed as a guy with backup or maybe a special teamer and, that kind of stuff. So I thought it was interesting that even though he fell, and he fell because of his testing, that the the guys that get paid to do these evaluations had him as the second best in the league.
Wow. Wow. I mean, I can see it. I mean, the guy interviews great. Coaches rave about him. Players from Michigan love him. Uluwatimi calls him his brother. There's just a lot to like there. I think it's one of the, like you said, one of the most underrated signings or draft picks I think that Seattle had. And time will tell for sure. But I'm excited about this position group because it's decent. Now let's talk about a couple other guys. Miles Adams, he's hung around the team now for 3 years, 6'2", 285, kind of a base defensive end guy, either in a 4-3 or a 3-4. To me, I think he's kind of more of a 4-3 guy that needs a little bit of help from an outside linebacker and so forth on his outside edge. I think would be good for him. The He's just a under league average rotational run defender to me. That doesn't really offer you anything as far as pass rush or disrupting the pocket or anything. I'm not excited about him. I never really have been. The team keeps him around though for a reason. So there's Miles Adams.
Yeah, I mean 6'2", 290. He's a little undersized. Um, Not a good run defender. He's supposed to be quick and with a guy with some pass rush potential as an interior guy. But last year when he came in and actually got on the field, um, the defense, like you could see, he was a weakness.
Yes,
He was
drop off
he was
from
a
a
lot.
from a low, uh, you know, a
Yeah,
low ceiling. He was even a further drop off from that. At least the
and
play dictated that.
yeah, and so it is I do wonder how long he sticks around. I think that he
I don't
might
think
be
he
a
makes it out
good.
of camp.
I kind of don't either. He hasn't made it out of camp. In the last, the 2 years he's been with the team, he's ended up practice squad, and then, yeah, he gets a call up because they need a big body, but, um, he is why I think that a guy like Mario Edwards makes the roster, because they'd rather have Mario Edwards, who is a
I'd rather
better
have Mario
player,
Edwards.
um, even if he's older and, that kinda stuff. I just think that it's a situation where Miles Adams just, unless he comes in and just has a much better year and just all of a sudden something clicked and he, is doing really well, I just go back, like I said, I go back to the tape. He just wasn't good when he was in there.
Another guy, MJ Anderson, undrafted rookie
Mhm.
free agent, 6'2", 270, really undersized, but a guy like this is going to be fringy anyway. You kind of want to bring him in, see what he's got. If he's got the potential, you figure out a way to either put him on IR or get him on your practice squad and build him up. Who knows at this point? It's very early in the roster building process. So we'll see what happens there. But he's a little bit of a potential guy as far as a pass rusher is concerned. He's got a little bit
Mhm.
of that interior opportunity. I don't see him as, he could be a 4-3 defensive end, but on a 3-4, you're going to want him at that 3 tech spot. And we'll see how he develops.
Well, I mean, he's a guy that hasn't played a lot of football. I mean, that's really what it comes down to. This is a guy that um, hasn't been a football player for a long time, and therefore he's learning the game. Um, didn't test particularly well. His athleticism scores not great, but as we saw with Mike Morris, that doesn't necessarily mean as much as you might expect with the with interior guys. It's all about, some of it's about strength and stuff, but he missed a year of football in high school, and then he redshirted and didn't get game time um, as a freshman, and then he played only in 5 games in 2020, um, and then he transferred, and he only had 5 starts last year. I mean, so this is a guy that is not played a lot of football, and you can kind of tell. He has a lot to learn, but there's something there when you look at him. Like, you can see he's an old school football player, right? He's will often use a 4-point stance rather than a 3-point stance because it just what comes naturally. But he's a powerful kid, but he doesn't use his hands well because he's just basically flailing around for the most part. And his footwork is odd. And so he's a guy that just needs to be settled down and coached
Yeah.
and really just honed on his technique and stuff so he can get more out of what he does. And so he's probably a practice squad player this year so that they can do that, but a guy with potential to develop into a really good player down the road.
Yeah. And they're going to have him put on weight, get into the strength and conditioning room. Excuse me. Because he doesn't, he doesn't have the athletic profile to be on the outside. And so they're going to want him to gain a little weight. He's got enough of it, nimble feet and agility and violent hands and a high motor guy to slide inside. And we'll see how that develops. It's just it's taking a flyer basically, but they don't invite these guys as rookie free agents to come in just willy nilly. There's a
Hmm.
purpose. They want to see these guys up close, and he hung around enough at this point where they've already cut a few peripheral kind of guys and added new guys and so forth. This time of the year where it's just kind of a shuffle going on
Hmm.
back and forth. And if he's hanging around, we'll see if he makes it into training camp. And if he does, they really are interested in him and see what they've got. And then you're right, stash him on the practice squad, build him up for a year, see what happens next year.
Yeah.
And that's I think where his spot is.
So according to Pro Football Focus's tracker, he has 608 in-game snaps as a college player.
Yeah. Wow.
That's how little time he's gotten on the field. And so this is definitely a project. It needs to be viewed as such.
Yeah. That's equivalent to one season, in the NFL, basically. Um, okay. So that's it. I think that's it. That's
Hmm.
the list that I've got. How about you?
Nope,
Anybody
that's
else?
it.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I'm just going through the edge players to make sure we didn't miss one that's listed there but not going to play there. And nope, I think we got it.
Yeah. I think so.
So,
All right. Let's get out of here. It was a good show. Thanks for sticking with us on the first 15 minutes when I rattled on about, what I was seeing in OTAs and Michael Sean Dugar was and all the injury stuff and getting into the bulk of the show at defensive end. I like the group. This is where I start to get excited about the defense is this group. The next group that we're talking about is even just for me, just a little bit more of a group that I really like that together combined, I'm feeling better about this defense the more I kind of dig into it a little bit. Now, there's a lot of projection there as far as can it all come together? But my optimism in June is pretty high, and so I'm hopeful. That we've got something here that we can build on. So anyway, that's it. Let's get out of here.
let's get out of here.
Find Keith on Twitter at Myers NFL. You can find me at NWC Hawk. The show's at Hawks Playbook on Twitter. And you can find us on your favorite podcast platform and YouTube. And when you do, hit that subscribe button. And if you feel like you like the show, leave us a positive review. That always helps. So until next time, go Hawks.
Go Hawks.
Seahawks Playbook podcast listeners, thanks for joining us for another edition of the show. You can find us on Twitter. Bill is at NWSeahawk, Keith is at Myers NFL, and the show is at Hawks Playbook. You can listen and subscribe to the show at SeahawksPlaybook.com.